particularly weird one. Well, we're looking at a door. What it's to do with is what this building is made of, which is different types of timber. And when this building was built in 1830, it was actually a very traditional type of building. It wasn't a particularly innovative building, which you might have expected from the railway company, which was in itself a very innovative organisation. But this building was built so fast that they didn't really have time to use the most modern and robust, from the point of view of being fireproof, techniques of building. So they had to go for the trusted traditional methods. Has anybody got any idea of how long it might have taken to build this building? I know you haven't seen the full extent of it from the outside, but basically it's 5 stories, 5 bays in 1830 with no mechanical devices.
7 years?
Less than 5 months. And if you walk around to any building sites in Manchester and look at a building, I know a lot of the buildings are bigger, but look at a building of comparable size, I defy you to find one that's been built that quickly. And one of the things that shows is that in this country too, you know, manual labour was cheap. People didn't get paid very much in the way of wages. And in fact, they were actually quite lucky working on the railway, because it was so important that the railway was finished on time that the brick setters actually had quite a lot of power, and they staged a walkout for higher wages, and the railway company had no choice but to pay them more, because they couldn't not finish on time and not have the Duke of Wellington as their guest at the opening ceremony. So that's the reason why this is a timber frame building, which by that time was going out of fashion for warehousing and cotton mills, because it was too prone to fire. But because they had to build it so fast, they went for this typical traditional timber construction, and most of the timber in the building, the posts, joists, the beams, the floorboards, is actually European timber. It's pine and oak. But there were 2 very special types of wood that they used in 2 places in the building. And one was for the sills of the loading bay doors. So this type of door, which is where goods were brought in and out to go by cart, horse-drawn cart, by road. These are sometimes called loophole doors. And because things like crates and cotton bales and all kinds of things, barrels, would be dragged across the threshold of the doors, the door sills would be subject to an awful lot of wear. And so they used a particular type of wood for the sills because it was so resistant to wear, it was very durable, and that was African oak, which again is predominantly found in particular parts of West Africa, including Sierra Leone. So this was another of the important commodities that Europeans were looking for in West Africa, because it was, you know, types of tropical hardwoods that there weren't kind of European species that gave you the same properties. The other one, which actually came from Central and South America, is the top of the post. If you look at the top of the post here, where you have a post and then what's called a spreader pad, and then the beam sits on top of that, and that's another special type of wood. That's called greenheart, and it comes from Central and South America, and the properties that has. So it's very it's very dense, and it's very resistant to compression. So in a timber building, you've got really strong forces of compression and tension when you've got lots of load on the floors. So that was to help spread the load. So as I say, the link here is the fact that what this warehouse entirely symbolises, both in the materials that were used to build it, but also in the goods that were stored here, was how intrinsic to Manchester's history at that time was the ability to trade with all parts of the world.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at this building, I mean, even if you just look at that beam along there, that was once a tree. You can imagine how big how old that tree was before they actually cut it down to put that beam there. And you've got to understand that at one point England was completely covered in trees. And the Romans and William the Conqueror after that just totally decimated all the trees in order to build manor houses and all various things. Just look at this building and imagine how many trees were chopped down and used to build this building.
Not only from trees from native land, because we're speaking there from Africa, so I go well through my paternal grandparents from there, from my maternal grandparents, trees from South America. just not only human beings, but material resources that are brought here.
Yeah.
You know, and then the interconnections with many of us of African descent.
Yeah.
You know.
So what you're actually studying here, you're studying a rainforest, basically.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? This is all part of the decimation of the rainforests that have taken place over the planet. You know, because all the trees have been chopped down in England, and they needed trees in order to build things like this, and so they had to go to other people's countries and steal their trees from them, basically.
Well, to be fair, more than 90% of things in here are northern European oak and pine forests, but yeah, I take your point.
Yeah.
And obviously at that point they didn't have kind of forestation programs, they didn't have fast growing species that they have now, so it took a long time to regain the trees. In the passenger station about the success of the passenger services, when they started the goods services in December 1830, they were just as successful, and so they very soon found that one warehouse wasn't enough to store all the goods that were coming through the station. So in addition to this warehouse, they built 2 more warehouses which were exclusively for the storage of cotton, and one of the warehouses lay more or less where this viaduct lies, so kind of parallel to the 1830 warehouse, and the other one came off the viaduct transverse to it, so that they could put bridges between the 3 warehouses and pull the wagons through back to the track. And so initially those 2 whole warehouses were purely for the storage of cotton, and as I say, at that time much of that would have been American cotton. And the reason why they're not here anymore is because in 1866 there was a huge fire, possibly one of the most dramatic fires in Manchester's history. I mean, it was certainly one of the most dramatic points in the history of the site. It was such a big fire that it attracted fire services from as far away as Blackburn, who saw the fire from afar and got their fire engines out to come and help this big blaze. And basically it completely destroyed one of the warehouses and almost destroyed the other. But at that point in 1866, actually, neither of the 2 warehouses was being used for storage of cotton, for reasons that I'm sure you can guess. Because what had happened just prior to 1866?
Great fire.
The American Civil War.
American Civil War.
So basically from 1860 to 1865, Lancashire cotton industry was really struggling. It went through what was called the cotton famine, because the northern states were so effective in blockading the southern ports that very little cotton got out of the states to Britain, and so the cotton mills, a lot of the cotton mills were starved of cotton, and therefore workers were out of work. And the 2 warehouses that had been used to store cotton were being used to store other kinds of goods relating to the textiles industry, like dyestuffs and that kind of thing. But they were equally flammable, hence the fact that this giant fire took place. So that's how the site ended up being a little bit changed, and so this viaduct was built in about 1867 as part of the redevelopment of the site.